We'll give everybody a second to get settled and we'll get started. Okay, so welcome to the Camarillo Airport Noise Compatibility Planning Study, public meeting number 3. My name is Stacy Falcione and I'm part of the outreach team and I'll be helping with the facilitation tonight. So as you came in this evening, most of you grabbed an agenda as well, so you have that in hand, but this is kind of what the night looks like. So we're going to be going over how did we get here? And your director of airports will come up and talk about that. We're going to be going over the study process, the Noise Compatibility Program study materials, chapters 5, 6, and 7, and then the status of measures and kind of what's underway now. And then we're going to also be taking a quick 10-minute break. And that's when anybody that has any remaining question cards, you guys can fill those out and raise your hand, and our staff will bob around and pick those up and bring those up to the front. And then we will, again, have that 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll convene and we'll have our formal question and answer session. So all of your questions will be read aloud, and we'll get some answers from our experts behind us. And then we will go on to talk about where do we go from here. And quickly, I wanted to remind everybody, again, thank you so much for taking the time to come out. You know, we want to make sure that we are being respectful of one another. And so I wanted to kind of go over this quickly. The county is committed to ensuring that all participants can be fairly and clearly, you all can share your ideas, comments, and concerns about the project. And we want to make sure that we're continuing to provide a safe and equitable process. And again, we want to all remember to treat each other with kindness and respect, including your neighbors, moderators, and the panel. When you do have a question, we want to make sure that we're addressing the front, so the moderator and your facilitator. And we want to, of course, respect the format of the meeting and maintain a conversational tone. And so before we move on, I would also like to call up our interpreters. We have our Spanish interpreter and our Mixteco interpreter that's going to come up here and let you guys know that they are here to serve you.
Buenas tardes a todos. Si alguien necesita interpretación en español, por favor avíseme y con mucho gusto les proporciono el equipo. Good afternoon. I am a Spanish interpreter, and if anybody needs interpretation in Spanish, I will be happy to assist. Thank you.
Kung disandi tu ubeni pero yenji na casa sabira tininyo ninya da kwa tu mumira ka benita ku kutoni niniti tu kung kana kivichi. Good afternoon to everybody. If anybody needs interpretation services for Mixteco, we are available to provide interpreting services. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to your Director of Airports, Keith Freitas.
All right, first of all, good evening, everybody. Thank you for participating in this process that we started about a year and a half ago. Tonight, in participation, we'll go over some things you may have heard me over the last few meetings talk about, but I'm going to hit them a few more times. Again, how did we get here? A year and a half ago, we were hearing a lot of feedback from our elected officials, Board of Supervisors. We have Supervisor Kelly Long here tonight, Supervisor Vianney Lopez, City Council members. We have our Mayor Tony Tremblay's here tonight, Councilmember Tennyson's here, but Council members Santangelo, Kildee, and Martinez Bravo, all providing feedback. Even the city manager, county administrator, all wanting to make noise a priority and things that we can do. The city of Camarillo finished up with a survey of the community members. So all of that was leading us to what can we do better at both of our airports, both Oxnard and specifically Camarillo. So, we had planning studies going on. We knew that the one thing we could do was ask for a grant to help us fund the process, to help us identify the noise issues and what mitigation things we could do that the FAA would approve, and things we could just do on our own. So that's kind of what you're going to hear tonight. And I can't say this enough. Again, I've been with the county almost 3 years. I want to be clear. There are certain things I want to be clear that we're not going to do. We're not changing the current role of the airport. It's going to remain a general aviation facility. We're not looking for large air cargo. I won't use a name because I don't want it to continue and perpetuate. Not large air cargo is not coming to Camarillo. We're not looking to lengthen the runway and stay consistent with the Joint Powers Agreement that we signed back in 1976. And no commercial airline service. Again, I can't say it too many times. But over the last 3 years, nothing's changed on our side. And none of those are happening. And the final thoughts I want to leave you with, again, is you're being heard. This is why this process was developed. And you're going to hear tonight again some things the FAA will allow us to do, and then things we just on our own are going to go above and beyond to mitigate. We have this roadmap forward. That's what you're going to hear tonight. That's the final process. And lastly, our efforts are perpetuity. They're not going to end. We know that this is an ongoing, long-term process. So that's what you're going to hear from us. So again, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you and good evening. As you can see, my name is Erin Powers and I'm a projects administrator, and I have been asked to share a quick look back at where we have been with the study and how we arrived here tonight. You may recall, if you've been part of this process, that the Part 150 noise study comprises of two parts: the NEMs, or noise exposure maps element, which focuses on identifying the noise contours and quantifying a noise issue as defined by the FAA, and the NCP, or Noise Compatibility Program element, which focuses on FAA-eligible noise mitigations, and then the additional step that airport has taken, which is to include voluntary measures that airports can take to address noise outside of FAA thresholds. And that becomes more important as we move through the material. Starting with the noise exposure maps, in 2022, nearly 2 years ago, we actually kicked off the noise study, as Keith mentioned. And as part of that process, we were gathering information for inventory lists and aviation forecasts, and we were able to share that information with the public at our first public workshop in March of 2023. That was followed by community noise measurements in over 4 months in May through August, and a second public workshop where we shared the noise contours, which were a result of the information we had collected, modeling, and comparing those noise measurements against a model to make sure that it was representative. Finally, in December, we were able to submit the noise exposure maps, that first part of the study, to the FAA for review, and that is currently where they are, is under a full line of business review. And that concluded temporarily until we have their approval, the noise exposure map element of the study, and we were finally able to focus on the noise compatibility program, which is where we believe most of the community would be most interested in, because this is the section this is where we can focus on the actions that we can take via the FAA and our voluntary measures. In June of 2024, when we finally were able to kick this off, we started with community listening sessions so that we could hear concerns and ideas from our committee members about what they would like to see and what kind of measures they wanted us to examine. And we followed that with technical conferences to help inform those ideas with aviation and lounge use focused professionals. And we used all that to help develop the final chapters of the study, which is what brings us here today. It is worth noting that throughout this whole process, we've had a robust public involvement. We have, aside from the broad outreach through advertising of our meetings and e-blasts of meeting reminders, availability of new materials, partnering with the city to help spread our message of the study and the materials available. We've also had dedicated study websites. We activated as part of this process a planning advisory committee and sent out requests for applications, and we accepted every invitation of anyone interested to serve on that PAC. We also shared updates publicly through our airport advisory platforms, and we met with neighborhood groups and encouraged comments all along the way. I have one final slide before I'll turn you over to Kaufman, and we can actually get into the content of the chapters that we're here for tonight. And I call this slide, for me, the opportunity/commitment slide. And the reason for this is that the first part of our study revealed that most of the community's noise concerns did not meet the FAA thresholds for noise exposure. And because of that, federal resources are not going to play into mitigating those noise concerns. So the airport has turned its focus on what we can accomplish voluntarily, using this study as a platform to help demonstrate the continued commitment and to make progress on reducing noise where we can. And with that, we'll turn it over to Corey, and we can start talking about the study itself.
Thank you, Erin. Good evening. Good to see you all here. Thank you for participating in the 150 study at Airport. So, following up on what Erin mentioned, is that coming out of our noise exposure maps document, and all these materials are on the study website. So if you haven't seen the study website, there's a link should be on the comment sheet. If it's not there, come find me and we can get you the link. So there's all narrative to support all the graphics that you see on the screen. So coming out of our noise exposure maps document, which is a technical document that explains and documents how the noise exposure contours were developed, we determined that based on Part 150 land use compatibility noise thresholds, there are no noise compatible or noise sensitive land uses within the noise contours. So this is, if you hear us talking about the 65 CADL noise exposure contour, that is shown on this graphic here. It is the 65 CNEL noise exposure contour is the solid line that you see on the map here, and there are no noise sensitive land uses within the noise exposure contour. So that is an FAA question: are there noise sensitive land uses within the 65 CNEL noise contours? When we go through that noise exposure map process, that is the question that FAA is asking. So coming out of that, we began to work, as Erin mentioned, on our noise compatibility program. So that is Chapter 5, Chapter 6, and Chapter 7. So the Chapter 5 is the noise abatement alternatives, and Chapter 6 is land use alternatives. So within the Chapter 5 product, we're looking at a list of, a laundry list of noise abatement alternatives that FAA has set forth in Part 150. 14 CFR Part 150. It provides the framework for this type of study. And then also So we're looking at land use alternatives, what can we do potentially to the general plan, to zoning, and potentially developing noise navigation easement programs. Coming out of those alternatives discussions, which were supported by the listening session that was held in June 2024, which is an additional step that the Department of Airports took to receive additional ideas, thoughts from the public on what we should be studying, kind of knowing what the result of that noise exposure maps document was, that there are no residences within the contours. What other ideas does the public have beyond FAA's standard list of procedures? And so coming out of that, we took those ideas to the technical conferences and talked with both aviation professionals and land use professionals to develop a list of potential measures to be included in the noise compatibility program. So it's important to note that once we develop a noise compatibility program, that program is submitted to FAA for consideration. Over time, FAA's review of noise compatibility programs has changed, particularly since adoption of the 1999 noise compatibility program for Camarillo Airport. FAA, as I mentioned earlier, will ask the question, will this measure reduce noise impacts within the 65 CNEL noise contours? So, as I mentioned earlier, there are, based on the noise exposure maps of today, there are no residences within the contours. So we had to revisit those measures that are currently in the program. We'll talk about that here in a few minutes. And then, as we're thinking about the types of measures that are included in the noise compatibility program, if you attended the last meeting, Dave did a great job of outlining kind of the lanes that we live in with regard to restrictions. It's important to note that any new access restrictions at the airport would require approval under Corp 161, so this is a different kind of federal process. Nationwide, there have been no approvals under that Corp 161 process. It would be even more challenging given the fact that there are no impacts within the contours. And then just another reminder that the 1976 JPA is grandfathered in, so there's some kind of restrictions outlined there, and it may not be amended, included to increase its restrictions. So revisiting, or kind of looking at the measures, so in 1999, the current noise compatibility program had 1 land use measure, 5 program management measures, and 14 noise abatement measures. Notably, if that same program was submitted to FAA today, many of those measures would get labeled as disapproved for the purposes of Part 150. So, kind of going through this process, made the decision to transfer some of those noise abatement, actually all of those noise abatement measures, over to a section of the document that will not be reviewed by FAA. And those largely will be within the fly-friendly VC program. This is the program that the county has more recently continued to update regularly. So it's a document, PDF that's available on the airport's website. It's a flexible document and can be responsive to the current situations. So it's important to note that if we took this, if we took the plan as it stands today and submitted to FAA would generally reject those types of measures that are in the noise compatibility program. So kind of moving on to looking at measures that are currently in the draft, so this is the 2024 draft noise compatibility program for the airport. There are several measures for these 3 land use management measures that are recommended to be included. So that is using the new noise exposure maps, those contours, to update during the next update of the general plan. So those, oftentimes you see noise contours in general plans, so it is recommended that the current noise contours for the airport be incorporated into the general plan, as well as policies referencing the Camarillo Airport Part 150 study. The next recommended land use measure is to adopt a compatibility checklist. So this is related to when development is proposed near the airport. The local land use planners would evaluate whether or not the proposed development is within the contours and make some recommendations based on that. And then ultimately taking these noise exposure contours and using those as part of an update to the Ventura County Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan, which is a document that is administered by VCTC. Moving on to the program management measures that are recommended. There are several measures here that are highlighted in green, and those are actually measures that the county has already undertaken. So this is continuing the airport's noise complaint handling system. This is a system, if you go onto the website or if you make a complaint, it interfaces with the VNOM system. This is radar flight tracking information, so complaints can be researched and correlated to specific aircraft events. The next program management measure is updating the noise exposure maps and noise compatibility program. So FAA's expectation when they give a grant for this type of study is that an airport will continue to update that study over time. So the interval for that is 10 to 15 years. So that would be kind of revisiting all of the materials that we've developed to date as part of a new study. And then the third measure is monitoring implementation of the Part 150 study. So there are these noise compatibility program measures, and then this would be an annual review to see which measures have been completed and which measures may be undertaken in the coming year. So this is a list of recommended measures that would be part of the noise compatibility program, but not submitted to FAA for review. So these include dedicating a full-time staff person to manage and lead the noise abatement program. So this is leading the community outreach efforts, responding to inquiries about noise, and generally interfacing with the public. The next one is developing and distributing noise mitigation materials to local pilots, flight schools, and businesses. This is the Fly-Friendly VC program that I mentioned earlier. Again, that's a product that can be updated regularly. I think it received an update recently, and then continuing to educate pilots that operate at Camarillo Airport with that information. And then the next one is to update the pilot publications for noise mitigation information, and this is including radio broadcasts that pilots hear as they're approaching. Most recently, it was updated to indicate that approaches from the west are encouraged during nighttime hours. Purchasing the flight track system to assist with identifying tracking aircraft operations, so that's what I touched on earlier. And then also continuing to meet with pilots, flight schools, and businesses regularly to communicate noise mitigation efforts. And as I mentioned earlier, all those green, those items that are highlighted in green are activities that the airport is currently undertaking as ongoing efforts. So this continues on. So there's continuing to have outreach events to allow the public to visit the airport. So this is not just communicating with pilots, but also engaging with the public so the public can understand what happens at the airport, what types of activities are going on there, and to learn about the operations and the importance of the airport to the community. This next point is evaluating changes to jet approaches into Camarillo Hotel to mitigate noise. So this is a specific task or a specific feedback that we received at the listening sessions, and I think it's been talked about in the community pretty regularly over the last several months or even here, to potentially look at other ways that jet aircraft could approach Camarillo Airport. And this is something that's going to be discussed in more detail here in a few moments. Number 8 is educating real estate agents and potential home buyers about Camarillo Airport operations and its presence in the community. So helping people to understand where the airport is and kind of what is happening here at Camarillo Airport. Then on an as-needed basis, evaluating noise monitoring. So we did, as Aaron mentioned, we did noise monitoring as part of the Part 150 study. While not a requirement, that is helpful information to understand what noise levels are like related to aircraft events. And then lastly, encouraging a full update of the Ventura County Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan. So this is a document that's used by the Airport Land Use Commission when evaluating new development proposals near airports. So I'm going to invite Jeanette and Dave up to talk about a couple of those points that were highlighted with red arrows. Oh, all right.
All right, we're changing it up a little bit. So I just want to interject before the team comes up. One of the things that we've heard since the beginning, a year and a half ago, when we were at our first public meetings, is we don't care about all this other stuff. What are you doing for us about noise and that? So that's what this next section is focused on. And I want to clear up a contradiction you may have heard is the FAA doesn't allow us to do, they won't approve certain things because we don't have any homes in the 65 CA contract. But that doesn't mean we can't do things on our own. So that's what you're going to hear, the things above and beyond is we're going to do. Perspective, we have 0 homes in 65 contour. An airport like LAX has 13,000. And Corey touched on that. That just means their noise impacts are so bad that they have funding that's available to them. We just don't fall at that level. But we know we have issues, as I've talked about, the last 2 years plus. So this is what you're going to hear, the things we're going to do. Yeah.
Very short, so I have to make a huge adjustment. And then Dave will come up and it'll go the opposite direction. All right. Good evening to all of you. I'm Jeanette Brady, the Communications and Engagement Manager and Public Information Officer for the Ventura County Department of Airports. Many of the points that I will be touching on this evening, Corey discussed in his presentation, but I wanted to make sure you put a face to some portion of the work that's been done on the public facing part of the work that we do. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of you in the 2 years that I've been here, so I see a lot of familiar faces and a lot of new faces, and so we're really glad that you're here. As you know, the department began a shift in community outreach leading up to my arrival, and we've remained committed to building and nurturing relationships with all of our stakeholders, including all of you here this evening. We realized that for years, the department missed the mark on ensuring that the community was involved and informed of all things airports, airport related. So again, I'll reiterate that we're glad you've joined us this evening. Yes, our work is, we're here to oversee the successful operation of Camarillo and Oxnard airports, but we're here for you also. So I appreciate, as I join everybody in appreciation for your role in being involved with all of this. Aside from the creation and continued cultivation of my position, our team has made a concerted effort to listen to all stakeholders and move forward toward progress in every feasible way. Efforts so far have included comprehensive communication materials, both in print and digital format, that are targeted at enhancing community awareness and engagement. We've also worked toward the creation and implementation of the Fly Friendly VC program, the purchase and continued refinement of a flight tracking and public comment system, and continued meetings and engagement with community members and city officials. Most recently, our efforts have included the expansion of the Fly Friendly VC program for Camarillo specifically, that provides guidance for jets and focuses on alternative runway options for nighttime arrivals and voluntary extended curfews. Meetings and discussions with chief pilots about the jet guidance and airport fixed-based operations management teams regarding the flight-friendly jet guidance, all of which have been very well received. We've updated the ATIS, or Automatic Terminal Information System messaging, indicating flight-friendly BC jet guidance, which includes alternative runway options for nighttime arrivals, as I mentioned just a bit ago. And then finally, the expedited evaluation of alternative approach courses and glide paths, which our Deputy Director, Dave Nafee, will touch on for you now.
Right after I put the mic up. Thanks, everybody. So lots of information coming at us. What I'm excited about is the fact that there are so many different things that we can do. And we've heard, yes, the FAA says you need to have homes inside your 65C and EL for us to approve things, to review and approve items. But we're talking about things that we can do, we're committed to doing outside of that, because we recognize that noise affects people in their homes outside of that contour. So to that extent, we're delighted that there are things we can do. And I just wanted to highlight one of the things that we want to do right away. In fact, we've begun, and we do have a guest speaker who can help shed some light at a deeper level on that. And that is on an approach analysis. So this answers the question, why do jets have to fly exactly the way they do, right down the center line, right over the top of homes, or over the top of my home, or why do they have to be at the height that they're going over every time? Why can't they fly over the agricultural fields? Why can't they fly higher? Well, in jet world, they fly where their instruments tell them to fly, and where air traffic control instructs them to line up on a certain area, sometimes miles and miles out. And so, being the fact that they're quick and and it's a complicated system and everything is geared on safety, we see that. But we asked the question amongst ourselves, and it's been amplified by suggestions we've heard from this group in our listening session, and from building consensus that we should examine this issue at a deeper level. And that's coming from the City Council has asked us to do that. Our own advisory bodies have asked us to do that. In fact, the Board of Supervisors have asked us to look very closely at the approach analysis in terms of charting for our jet pilots in particular, different ways that they can approach the airport, different heights that they can go. You can get pilots to do things, particularly if you put it on a piece of paper and say, fly it this way. And so, yes, it's voluntary. Yes, there's a lot of things that the county doesn't have control over in terms of where flying occurs. But if we work hard and put new paper in front of the pilots, then we have a better chance of success. So that's something that is tangible, that we can take out of this program and implement. In fact, we've already done it. So we've just earlier today, Paul Hanna, who I'll introduce in just a moment, started his new assignment to do exactly that, to examine the charts, to examine the airspace around this airport to see if some changes can be made. So I'm really excited that this is something that is going to make a meaningful difference in what we can expect out of the outcome of this effort, and so you can rest assured that it's more than just things that we've been doing all along. It's more than just some minor tweaks that we hope work on a voluntary basis. This is something I think would have some real impact. So that's why we're delighted. That's why we're delighted that we were able to start as soon as we did. So before I just drum it on, I'm going to introduce Paul Hanna with Lean Technology. He's going to walk us through a little bit of his experience in doing exactly what I've just described at other airports and why he believes that this could have some good impacts for us as well. So, Paul Hanna.
That's very kind, thank you. And And I do promise we'll have some pictures, so there's hope for more than words. But let's see if I can. Excellent. We'll start here, but just a few words to begin with. So again, you've heard this from a couple of folks speaking tonight. Thank you all very much for attending. Finding really good and effective noise abatement solutions starts with all of you in this room. And it starts with the great ideas that many of you are going to bring and suggest. I've already received some ideas this evening from one of the participants here in the room today, and I just want to encourage that throughout the process. What I have listed there on the screen are 4 ideas that we have on just a start of what we think we can do to try to reduce aircraft noise in a meaningful way and in a near future kind of way, not something way off into the future. And I'm going to go through them with some pictures in just a little bit. But the first thing, just to go through them quickly, we're going to talk about a new, what's called a charted visual flight procedure. The second thing, we're going to talk about what are called instrument approach procedure changes to the east of the airport, which is a lot of the jet aviation aircraft that comes in. They're coming from Southern California, Northern California, destinations farther away in the United States, and they're following a prescribed path that their pilots see that their planes are going to automatically trigger against, and they're going to head for the runway in almost the same fashion all the time. And we're going to look at changes to what can be done for the aircraft coming from the east. We're also going to look at very pragmatic things that the airport can do much more quickly than working with the FAA, which is number 3 there. And that's the idea of looking at something called a visual glide slope indicator. That's a really fancy word for red and white lights. And those red and white lights are installed on the airport today. And they tell the pilots, they give them a visual cue about what angle they have to fly at the runway. And there are ways to change that angle much quicker than it is to change instrument procedures or charted visual flight procedures that may provide some noise relief for some residents. And the last thing that we're going to look at and just discuss here tonight is an overall goal to increase the utilization of runway 8 at nighttime as much as we can. These are the 4 ideas that we're bringing to bear here at day 1. There may be more great ideas out there that are feasible that we can work with the FAA on to try to implement. But for tonight, this is where we're starting with. So the first thing I want to talk about is a charted visual flight procedure, or a CVFP. These are not super common. Here in Southern California, there are quite a few, and this example is actually from Monterey, which I would probably call closer to Northern California. And the idea of a charted visual flight procedure is to create a repeatable path that's used by pilots in visual conditions. Visual conditions just mean the weather's pretty good, the pilots are flying the aircraft, they're looking out the window, but they do have references. So in this case, they've got visual references on the ground, like Laguna Seca Raceway or a specific highway. These have been used very successfully by both the FAA and airports to create paths that achieve something that a regular instrument procedure can't do. Sometimes it's to come in at a steep altitude. Sometimes it's to avoid a noise-sensitive area, and in the case of Monterey, that's exactly what was happening. So what you see on the screen there is on the right-hand side, that is just an example of what a charted visual flight procedure looks like. And on the left-hand side, that's what it basically looks like in 3 dimensions. And for Monterey, the key for their CVFP was to make sure that aircraft came down a highway that already produced a lot of noise, that stayed over the Laguna Seca Raceway, and at the last moment, safely turned the aircraft into the airport to avoid other noise-sensitive areas. There are opportunities, we believe, here for Camarillo to look at the same thing. And this slide, I'm just kind of giving the beginning of an example. So what you see on this picture is you see some dark blue polygons, and you see some transparent ones. The dark blue polygons are the representation of like the 90th percentile. If we took all of the flights that flew those instrument procedures that have been there forever, and we gathered them all up and we saw where they are in 3 dimensions, that's what those dark blue polygons represent. So you have one path that starts way east of the airport, and it follows just a completely straight line right at the runway. There's a second path just north of that, which is also following an instrument procedure. So those are like the 2 primary paths that when the weather's not perfect, aircraft are going to be clear to. When things are busy, air traffic is going to use those procedures. And I think some of the noise complaints that the airport has received result from aircraft flying those paths. However, there's a swath on that transparent blue coming kind of from the southeast which are all aircraft that are flying essentially either visual or they're getting an instruction from air traffic to fly a slightly different path. And because aircraft already exist in that area, they're very dispersed. They're not following like a railroad in the sky. They're kind of following all over the place. If you look at the very southern boundary of that transparent thing where those arrows are depicting, that's the 101. And it is possible to start the exploration for something like a chartered visual flight procedure here, where that procedure would take aircraft down the 101 until basically you come down the hill, as many of us have done coming into Camarillo, and then you break off and create a path that takes aircraft away from the Old Town region directly at the runway. So this is just the beginning of an exploration. There are other opportunities, though, to look for chartered visual flight procedures that maybe take aircraft even further to the south. However, everyone in this room is conscious of it, the airport, the county, everyone, that if we start to move aircraft by procedure design away from where they have historically flown, that's called a noise shift. And that is a very sensitive thing, and this process is meant to be interactive with the public. And so if that is something we want to explore, either because we've got feedback from residents, that is something that we will put forward to meetings like this and put up on our website for people to give us that feedback to make sure that this is the best possible idea that the airport can move forward with. So another thing that we can look at, similar graphic, it's that same blue polygon. Now this time, I've just taken the two dark blue polygons that represent the instrument procedures. So our first option was to look at a chartered visual flight procedure where we can get very creative with the lateral path. This second option is where we can try looking at just increasing the altitudes of aircraft that have to come straight at the runway. So the assumption here is this is a good and safe path for the FAA, but maybe just bumping it up a little bit, making it more optimal for jet aircraft, increasing the height for general aviation aircraft will produce some reduction in noise to many of you who have to live underneath it. And there's two ways to do this. One is to just change the design of the procedure and bump it up. So we take that angle and we increase it a little bit, we change the altitudes going backwards. Another is that set of red and white lights that I described, and we can get to the same effect. So right now, the red and white lights give us a 3-degree angle, and we could increase it to 3.5. Doesn't sound like a lot, however. Over Old Town, it gets to about 75 feet or 100 feet higher, which for some aircraft might be noticeable. But as you start to back up that approach, it gets to 400 or 500 feet higher. And in those cases, that might be a perceptible noise enhancement. So interesting things for us to explore. However, we have an interesting conflict in our backyard here, which is Point Mugu. And the green swath that you see there are, again, that approximation of the military aircraft that go into Point Mugu. And the reason why we wanted to show this is they're going right over the top of the aircraft that are arriving into Camarillo. And that's something that we have to be very careful about, that if we start to just increase the altitudes of aircraft coming into Camarillo, we may also need to work with the Navy to increase the altitudes of aircraft going into Point Mugu. And that is something that our team has done successfully at other airports, and we're going to get engaged in the same conversation here with the Navy, Department of Defense, and the FAA. We hope that that might have a knock-on effect of decreasing noise for folks who live under the big green swath up there, because those altitudes would go up as well. But we don't have infinite creativity. These are just areas we're going to explore. The last thing I want to talk about is the other area we're already planning on targeting, which is making sure that at nighttime, especially after the towers close, that pilots of jet aircraft have every tool and an ability to use runway 8 to go out over the ocean, or go over the agricultural areas and then come in and make a landing on 8. Don't land on 2.6 if it can be avoided. And one of the things we've discovered already is that the only tool at the moment that these business jet operators have is that approach procedure that you see on the screen. And it's fine, it's safe, it's really inefficient, and it's lacking a couple of other super useful devices that most business jet operators would be looking for. So, for instance, it's not a vertically guided approach, which means that the pilots have to do just a little bit more work to use that procedure. And if they're given a choice, they'll land 2.6. Right? So if they're totally unaware of the noise abatement preferences and they were just looking at what is in their aircraft, what choices they have, choosing runway 8 might not be their first choice, and we want to fix that. We want to make it so that runway 8 is the first choice, especially at nighttime. And there's a couple things we can do, and I know Dave mentioned we got under contract today. Our team members have actually already solved 2 of the checkboxes, so we're going to have a lot to share on this particular avenue, I think, coming up in the future. One thing here, and I respect there's a lot of words on this slide, so I'm going to try to give you the summary point here, but this is the process that we generally follow when we work with communities, with the FAA, with air traffic, with aircraft operators, to implement the kinds of changes that I just described. The first thing I'd like to point out is the bottom. So on the left-hand side of the process, you'll notice things move fairly quickly, just a couple of months here and there, where we're working with you, we're learning about your noise experiences, we're taking your ideas about interesting procedure concepts and we're making them real. We're turning them into actual instrument procedures. And then as we keep moving along that process, we will make aircraft noise, what we call community flight procedure packages. And they look like this. This is an example from some work we do at San Francisco. They might look a little bit familiar. Those are single event noise calculations. And these are different. So for the Part 150 study, you've been hearing and learning about CNEL contours, which are annualized, approximations of lots of different aircraft operating in different hours, generating different kinds of noise. Single event noise is one aircraft, one flight. This is what it might sound like if you were in any of these positions underneath it. We like to use this technique to compare an existing procedure to the one that we're examining to change or to make a new one, so that you can get as much information as possible about whether it's going to be an effective change. So in this example, green is good and purple is bad. Now in this case, purple was all over the water, so that wasn't so terrible for human beings. And the green was residents of the South Bay City. So we will be using techniques like this to convert these great ideas that you may all bring to us and the ideas that I've described, and then turn them into something that you can review and give us your feedback on. Because as I go back to this process, we will move over the first couple of months up to the process where we collaboratively review which procedure changes we want to make and select them to take forward for the FAA to develop. If it's the case of the approach lights, those little red and white lights, that's actually a pretty quick spiral. So even though you see in that dark blue column there, number 5, it can take 12 to 36 months. That is true. Instrument procedure changes can take up to 36 months if you're working with the FAA. There are some other options on how to speed that up, and a lot of the work that we're doing in steps 1 through 4 is immediately transferable to the FAA, and so that may help to reduce some of the time. But I just want to make it clear that we will be looking for every opportunity we can to tactically reduce noise here, but it is not an instant process, and so we will do our best to try to keep it, but it could take potentially up to 3 years at a worst case scenario. So the last thing I want to point out, though, in this process is the white box, which is that this is not a fire and forget kind of opportunity. The airport has the resources, has the personnel, we have the mechanisms to not only pick out which procedures we think are going to be the best idea to take forward, but then follow up and measure and make sure that it did what we hoped. And if it didn't, well, then it's time to change track or to look for other solutions. So I really appreciate everybody's attention here tonight. I'm part of the team that's going to be here answering questions, but I'm going to hand it back to the rest of the squad. So thank you.
So that was a good first day, wasn't it? That was good. I just wanted to reiterate a couple of points. Paul's company working on these issues on our behalf, just responding to suggestions that we heard at the listening session and amplified by the other groups that I mentioned earlier. We were requested to expedite this task, and that's what we wanted to do. So we're not waiting to the end of this process in order to get some of these things rolling. We saw that the number of months for that for one of those columns, it being 12 to 36 months in duration, clearly that adds up to years, and so there's no point delaying any of that start. So we want to get that underway as quickly as we could. The selection of wing technology was also the product of a selection committee that included a member of the Old Town neighborhood. And if anybody knows Kyle Johnson, he did a great job supporting our group. We had other stakeholder groups represented as well. So we didn't just pick him out of the phone book. We had good help, and I think they made a good choice. And the process is also going to provide an opportunity for continued public involvement. So this won't be something that happens in the dark and we just roll it out one day. You're going to get to walk alongside us as we go through that. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody had that understood. And then for next steps, let me this ahead. Here, so we are in October. This is the location that we're at in the process. We're looking at 3 chapters that are out on our website for review. So if you haven't already, go look for those. And that's bcairports.org. And you'll find links to these documents there. So we welcome your comments on that. Following all of the comments and the input that we receive tonight and in the near future, we'll be wrapping up those documents and preparing for a hearing. So that'll be a hearing. The FAA process has us provide the opportunity for a hearing, which we are going to take advantage of that opportunity, and we're planning for that in April of 2025. And then on through the approval process, where it's going to go through our advisory bodies and onto the Board of Supervisors, and then finally onto the FAA for their final approval of that. And so now we get to, I believe, back to Stacy, and then she'll get us into a break period where we can gather your questions and move into the Q&A portion of this. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave. Okay, so all of you have a question card that you were given at registration. So if there's any outstanding question that you have after you've heard the presentation, this is the time to jot those down. And when you're done, you can raise your hand and some of our staff will walk around and grab that. But we're also going to go into a 10-minute break. So those of you who have questions, go ahead and take that time to do that. And for the rest of you, go ahead and get a refreshment and then come back in 10 minutes. So we'll reconvene at 7:05. Try and get through as many questions as we can today. We have a lot, so rest assured, those technical questions that maybe we don't get to, we will be submitting into the summary report, and the team will be addressing it. All right, here we go. First comment question, and I'm going to address the panel here, so whoever wants to jump in, let's go for it. Again, remember to be respectful, and during this time we're going to just have answers from the panel. We're not taking live questions. At the end of all these, if somebody has one more question to ask, then we'll give you that opportunity. All right, here we go. Can anything be done to stop the flights over 10 p.m. until 6 a.m.? Who wants to take that?
Yeah, don't fly.
Okay, I think we've gone through that over the several presentations we've done, even the city of Camarillo. We have limitations set by the FAA in us being able just to create new restrictions. We're not allowed to do that. And so the things we're doing and talking about are within our purview to do. So creating a new restriction. Do we encourage based companies, aircraft pilots that are coming in and out of the airport that are not flying as part of our Fly Friendly BC, not flying between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. That's what we encourage for all those that use the airport. So that's what Jeanette focuses on in her meetings with those base companies, corporate pilots coming in, encouraging them not to fly during those hours. And then we talk about some of the other things. Instead of coming from the east to the west, where Old Town is coming and landing the opposite direction. So those are all things we're working through. But can we set a specific restriction? And this goes for all of the ideas about restrictions. We are not allowed to specifically.
Thank you, Keith. Did not address frequency of future flights and limitations. So that's more of a comment. We're just going to keep moving forward on that. Why doesn't the county require airplanes to use the Oxnard Airport? Real quick answer.
So that'd be the same thing. Same thing is we can't require somebody to go somewhere else, use a different airport. Although, again, obviously Camarillo and Oxnard airports are utilized on a very frequent basis. And those are pilots that select to use those, but we can't dictate when they are.
Okay, and follow up here. Is there any way to make it more than just voluntary? Can there be a penalty?
No, there is not at this time.
Thank you. Okay, why were noise level test sites not up the and I might be saying this wrong, Posas Hill? So why were noise level test sites not up at Las Posas Hill?
So it's important to note that noise monitoring is a supplemental activity to a Part 150 study. So we selected sites that were within different quadrants to get data that we could compare to the noise exposure contour. So it is not a requirement to do noise monitoring. So we basically went with the available sites. We actually took recommendations from the public and coordinated with the residents that way.
Yeah, there's a few more. Okay, so why don't you just go ahead and, do you want to clarify?
Sure.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've done the noise study, and I looked at the sites that we selected. However, the sites that were selected are not of the higher elevation. And the higher elevation is up to 1.5 meters in advance of the fire. The elevations are reasonably higher in Norway when they take off. They address all the approaches, but the takeoff is occurring between midnight and 5 a.m. with a great deal of flood. And that's one of the questions. The first question, the second question, executive enforcement, because you have a lot of mitigation measures that are planned over time versus an immediate impact that you said takes 3 years or longer.
What about takeoff?
Nowhere that you address the topic. Or when I say that I saw taking off, which I totally understand from the whole town and nighttime. So those that are family appropriate that are being on.
So to the question about the noise monitor farther up the hill, there is one site that is, I don't know the number, but if I saw the map, I'd be able to identify there's one that is straight north of the airport.
Okay, so let's go back to the format. We're going to continue on. Thanks, Corey.
I'll at least ask the departure. There is, with the Joint Powers Agreement that was signed in 1976, grandfathered in with the FAA. So we do have enforcement on that issue. So if you have any of those, and we have those very infrequently, that aircraft depart between 9 and 5, but we do have enforcement action. It's not in the study. It's something that existed previously in 1976.
Okay, thank you. Was it said that planes land at Camarillo Airport after the tower is closed? If yes, how safe is that?
I'll answer that. That is a safe practice throughout the United States. That the bulk of the more than 19,000 airports in the country, most do not have towers. So it's a process where pilots are communicating with each other, and that's a very common practice throughout the United States.
Thank you, Keith. Why is there no noise monitoring set up permanently?
That's a good question.
Well, it's noise monitoring is part of one of the options. We left that in the Noise Compatibility Plan that we would evaluate noise monitoring. We compare that to the outcome that we would be looking for. As we've indicated, the noise monitoring isn't something that defines the contours. That is considering a forecast level of activity assigned to all the different types of airplanes that we'd expect to see over a period of time, and projected for now and in 5 years. So that's the way the contours are derived. But if the question is relative to the joint powers agreement, limits of 90 dB, and if that's what the monitors are expected to provide daily feedback on, if we sense that there's some need for that and some benefit to doing that, we're open to continuing the conversation about something in that category. So we have left that option in the plan.
Great, thank you, Dave.
That was my question.
Okay.
I think we're asking for noise monitoring not because it's part of the contours or anything like that. It's for the community. It falls on us to make noise complaints. Mm-hmm. And we turn into how many of us are complaining about it, how many people let go of that. If you had noise monitoring equipment, it would help the entire community, us and the airport, know what noise impacts are truly happening to our community outside of the JPA, outside of noise contours. It would take the pressure off the community and help us be better neighbors to know what is actually happening.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I've noticed the amount of noise over the park has greatly increased over the past year. Why are you allowing jets to disrupt a national recreation area?
San Marco Mountains, since you left that out.
I'm sorry, say the location again. Is that your
She left out the important part. Camarillo Grove.
Santa Monica Mountains.
Camarillo Grove Dog Park is part of the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area. I've been going there for years. I go there to nature watch and also to let my service dog have fun. And I can tell you the noise and the jets that are going over are different. There's the Merlin ID app from Cornell University that helps you listen to the sounds in your area to identify birds, species. I can't do that now because all they pick up now is a jet noise over bird sounds.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. We'll take that comment.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. What about all traffic approaching from the west and north of 101?
What?
Any traffic patterns or studies?
Oh.
Well, I would say that all of the traffic that is projected, forecast from all the different directions has been accounted for. So it's gone through.
If the FAA decide the outcome of the plan, what % of success is expected?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
If the FAA decide the outcome of the plan, what % of success is expected?
Thank you.
So I won't put a percentage on it. Again, what you heard is we are limited what the FAA will approve. However, what we're going to do, the success is 100%. We're already starting, again, we have an outside consultant. We have things we are already doing. So we're moving forward. That's not going to change. We're going to do this long term. The FAA's piece, again, the things we're submitting to them, we're pretty 100%, 99% likelihood they're going to approve those things we're asking them to approve. And the things we put on the list of what we're going to do and are already doing, we put it at 100%. We've got the commitment. We've got our board of supervisors that supported this through our aviation advisory committee, our city council members, our mayor from the city of Camarillo, all of them supporting and wanting us to do these things. So we're moving.
Thank you, Keith. Will this new plan subject Camarillo to the increased noise and air traffic Van Nuys Airport is experiencing?
What's happening, Van Nuys?
Sorry, could you
Repeat that. Will the new plan subject Camarillo to the increased noise and air traffic Van Nuys Airport is experiencing?
Sounds like it would happen.
The answer is Camarillo is Camarillo, Oxnard is Oxnard, and Van Nuys is Van Nuys Airport, and that demand is different for each of those airports. we've projected what ours will be. That's the process that we went through in the ALP update that we did last year and a half.
There's a follow-up question. What study is being done or will be done to address the air pollution Camarillo residents will suffer due to the increased air traffic?
So again, environmental process is dictated through CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, and NEPA, a national version of that, for any project we do at our two airports. So those standards are already set.
Will the county hold on filing the Part 150 noise study until the alternative flight path study is complete? If not, why?
I'll answer that. I mean, that seems counterintuitive to me in that we are going to continue to do all things possible to benefit our community. So to put a benefit for us on hold doesn't seem to make sense to me. We want to do everything we possibly can. We'll submit to the FAA for the things we want to do in the NCP. Concurrently, all the things we've already listed, including bringing Lean and Coughlin in to look at the approaches and all the great things you just heard.
May technology play a role in quieter aircraft?
Well, I would say yes, absolutely. The types of airplanes that are coming are going to be quieter. A lot of them are going to be driven by hybrid technology, hydrogen technology, electric technology, all of that. Bringing that mix into the airport is going to absolutely have a profound effect positively on the traffic and the noise associated with that, particularly displacing the aircraft that had previously, when they phased out, been propelled by piston engines. Small flight training traffic, we'll see a lot of that probably taper off over the next period of time, and other types of vehicles be more prevalent within our traffic.
There are 3 schools in the 65 CNEL contour. Will the airport do something to mitigate the noise impact to the students and teachers?
I would say that the residents of the schools, we wouldn't elect to bring them in the future. We have a compatible land use plan administered by the Airport Land Use Council or Commission that would preclude having new schools placed in the 65. Those that are there have their privilege of being there by virtue of the fact that they were there at the origin of the airport. And so that's why they're there. We don't have any plans to kick them out. And so that's the way that's handled by the FAA and by the county.
Another technical note, looking at those schools and the contours, the contour actually just clips the corner of those parcels. So if proposed to FAA would likely decline to participate in any sort of noise insulation project because it is not the actual, it doesn't fully encompass the building.
Thank you. The airport's appropriations increase year over year. What revenue is generated to offset these growing costs?
The airports are run as an airport enterprise fund, so we take $0 from the county. So the users of the facilities, we have in Camarillo a fairly large business park as well. So the about $10 million of revenue all come from the airport users. The pilots, the based airplanes, the businesses at the airport, and then the business park. Again, about $10 million between Oxnard, Camarillo, and the business park in the county.
Follow-up funding question. Can Camarillo provide less support for Oxnard Airport, who has had a loss from operations for 14 years, and Camarillo could be self-sustaining and not require FAA grant money?
So the Board of Supervisors could probably go down that road, but let me offer then that means all of the airplanes at Oxnard would probably move to Camarillo. is 90%. So think of that scenario, first of all. But again, the capacities Camarillo and Oxnard, and we heard this publicly, we're kind of at the limits right now. We don't foresee extensive growth, quite frankly, either. We don't have that much land left to develop. So, I don't see the board moving in that direction. Both airports are very well utilized. And so the funding, it's an airport system. It's kind of like saying, the busing system, that route doesn't make that much money, so let's shut that route down. It's a system that works well together in the national system, not just locally, but nationally.
Thank you. Do you track the efficiencies at the Fly Friendly program? And if so, how effective is it? Efficient is it?
So, first of all, Jeanette, on a regular basis, she's been with us for 2 years, and that is part of her assignment, project, is to develop these flight-friendly programs. She does that on a regular basis for Oxnard. We've seen great success. It's a little more complicated, as you've heard, changing things here in Camarillo, but those are the same things we're working to put in place, is those milestones and then checks and balances. So Camarillo is a little behind because of the complexities and what changes we can and can't make to date. But as we progress, yes, we will have milestones of how well we're doing. We have noise complaint comments that we receive, and that's the easiest way to look at how things are going and the feedback we get. But then there are, we'll be down to aircraft operations, nighttime curfew operations between 10 and 6. Those are all things we'll be evaluating as we
It sounds like most of the efforts to this point address noise are focused on Old Town. What about the Heights neighborhoods? The noise just south of Foothill Park are bad and getting worse.
So I would agree that a lot of the focus you've heard, and that is related to the fact that 90% of the noise comments we receive on a regular basis come from Old Town associated with jet operations. However, which is why we have done this entire noise study for both airports, we understand it's a bigger issue. So as we go through and there's opportunities to make changes and educate pilots when they operate, where they operate, those are things we will be doing. And as I mentioned multiple times, as you heard from Jeanette, this is forever on our side in the work that we'll be doing. With our pilots, corporate pilots, our businesses, our flight schools, our community.
What is the different directions of runway 8 versus 26? East/west, north/south?
We have one runway at Camarillo Airport. It is oriented east and west. So when it's 26, you're flying a compass heading of 260 approximately, which is into the prevailing wind, which comes off the beach. So 8 is the opposite number, 080. You truncate the last digit of that. So 8 represents 080 heading or eastbound, and 26 is 260 heading for westbound. So that's our one runway, 2 ends, based on which way you're pointed.
Okay, we have some more flight path questions. To Paul. Is Paul still here? All right. Why was purple over the ocean bad in your San Francisco map versus green good over the homes?
Great question. So the graphic that we showed, can everybody hear me okay? I think so. Oh, yeah, sure. That'd be great. Thank you. In that particular graphic, we were trying to present, again, one aircraft making one approach. And we're doing that using the single event noise calculation models available, and this is going to be a mouthful, the Aviation Environmental Design Tool, AEDT. And so what we do is we plot out the existing path of the aircraft, which in this case was aircraft that were flying into that green area. So they were coming right over the South Bay cities, right over the residents of Palo Alto, as an example. hanging a left and going straight into the runways in San Francisco. The proposed procedure that we were evaluating would take aircraft on a different track where they would, instead of going straight over Palo Alto and then making a left, they would actually head over the bay right away as quickly as they could at a much higher altitude and then maneuver back to align themselves with the runway. So the change in that particular graphic shows that the aircraft that were going straight over Palo Alto and coming in, that noise is now in a different place. That noise is now over the bay. So it's moved away from the green area and it's now introduced into the purple area. That's just one way of doing those graphics. There are a lot of different ways, and we're always open to community feedback if that isn't the best way. Actually, if you go to the address there, you'll find different ways that the airport and the project team have worked together to try to show those single event noise changes.
This might also be for you. Air traffic control at Camarillo Airport is now directing all incoming flights right over my house with measured noise levels between 65 and 90 decibels. What can be done to find alternative flight paths and how to best implement them? Part 1. Part 2, I'll skip down. Is it possible to request a higher initial approach or glide scope altitude for aircraft flying over residential areas approaching Camarillo Airport, especially private jets?
I think part 2 first. Yes is the short answer. But that is something that our team is going to be working with. To go back to the first question, with air traffic. So a little bit of insight. When we work on instrument approach procedures or even the charted visual flight procedure, we're working really with 2 different groups within the FAA. One of them is the air traffic controllers. And here it's actually quite complicated. You have the point Magoo folks that control the immediate area, and then just to the east, it switches to Southern California air traffic control, Southern California TRADCON. So you have 2 different groups of air traffic controllers that you have to coordinate with to figure out what they believe are the safe areas where if we want to increase the altitude of aircrafts, that they believe that that's not going to mess up everything else, because safety is first. I hate it. I mean, it's important, but safety first, noise is second to safety. Sorry, that's just how the FAA works. It's a good way. The other piece of that we work with is the FAA Flight Procedures team. And there's a flight procedures team that does nothing but work in the Western United States. One of their recently retired people is a part of our team. I'm happy to report, and he was one of the people who already took care of some of the procedure design challenges ahead of tonight's meeting. And the design criteria itself about how high can you keep an aircraft before they have to start that approach down into the runway, there are rules about what's reasonable to expect an aircraft to be able to do and what's reasonable to expect a pilot to try to achieve. So those are the 2 things that we're going to have to carefully consider when we look at what can we do to change like the beginning of an approach to see if we can get that altitude up higher and higher and hopefully reduce the noise. By the way, our ultimate goal, especially for jets, is to get something that's called a continuous descent. And the idea is that if you find just the right path for aircraft coming into the airport, they just pull their engines back to idle, which means they're not using the engine, they're just descending essentially, and it's very quiet, and they just descend all the way in. That is our goal with a lot of what we're going to be looking at for those approaches from the east.
Great, thanks, Paul. Part 3, which is, I think anybody can answer. Is air traffic control aware of the flight paths shown in the Camarillo Airport voluntary noise abatement procedures? Is air traffic control aware of the flight paths shown in the Camarillo Airport voluntary noise abatement procedures?
The answer is yes, and Jeanette's in the back. She has regular meetings with. Oh, she wants to talk.
I speak with the air traffic controllers at Camarillo and Oxnard Airport regularly. I've met with them. I've given them the latest jet guidance for flight-friendly VC. So in addition to our chief pilot meetings, the meetings with the FBOs, we're also making sure we're in contact with both towers on a regular basis.
What are your plans since the city is now encroaching on the airport?
I'm not super sure how to express whether or not encroachment is occurring. The airport sits in the midst of the city of Camarillo, and so those boundaries have been as they are for forever, to my knowledge.
Can I ask?
Sorry.
Okay, well,
Only if there's a clarifying point, then we'll take it from the audience. Otherwise, we're going to get through these and then we'll open it up to the public.
yeah, I mean, aside from some minor differences, but in terms of our homes being approved within the noise-sensitive areas for Camarillo Airport, they are not. But we're always watching and working collaboratively with the City of Camarillo's Planning Community Development Group, and they consult with us regularly, and so we have that open line of communication. So we wouldn't expect that to continue.
Could it mean
Thank you, Dave.
building a Freedom Park?
Was there ever an environmental study done to what the jets that are doing by flying over our home? So was there ever an environmental study done related to jets flying over our homes?
I guess I would say that environmental studies are tied to projects. So if there's a project and it requires study under CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, or under NEPA with the National Environmental Policy Act, those studies have been done. So we've met all of the requirements for that. So that would include anything that we've done with the runway and improving any other development on the airport. If it triggers a national policy, an environmental review, we do those. And so that's we meet the requirements under both of those acts.
Thanks, Steve. Would the Department of Airports consider deconflicting aircraft flying via approach runway 321 mitigation for mitigation aircraft operations? So will the Department of Airports consider deconflicting aircraft flying via approach runway 321 mitigation for military aircraft operations? And if yes, what or how would this be demonstrated, communicated with Magoo Airfield Traffic Control?
Yeah, I think this is probably a Paul thing. The 321, I think, is the Magoo run. So.
Yeah. So my apologies if I don't quite get the question, but I'm going to try, I think. So there are ways that air traffic, this is exactly what air traffic controllers are for. And just to expand on something I said a moment ago, there are levels of different air traffic controllers. So there's air traffic control tower, and there's a tower at Camarillo, right? And there's a tower at Magoo. And then there are traffic controller, like terminal radar controllers, basically, which handle kind of arrivals and departures, right? So it's two different kind of layers, and there's a third layer above them, but we won't get into that. And so the main challenge for making sure that those aircraft that are coming into Magoo are separated from the aircraft that are going into Camarillo is the job of that terminal radar control operation. So one way to do that is for air traffic controllers to see that there are two aircraft that are going to cross over one another, and they'll slow one down, they'll speed one up, they'll tell one aircraft to kind of go into a pattern or take some track miles or something like that. And that's what's done today. However, what we saw in that graphic is that the procedures into the two airports have been designed so that an air traffic controller could decide to allow two aircraft to fly into the two airports at the same time. There is enough separation for that to happen, even when the weather is not great. So I think some of those mitigations might already occur either because the air traffic controllers are taking the steps, but as we look at our opportunities to increase the altitudes into Camarillo, we are also going to look at what is required to keep that procedural, not air traffic controller, but like the designed separation from Magoo by raising it up as well. It's not a guarantee that they will do it, but we're going to try, and we're going to have that conversation with them and see what we can achieve.
Thank you, Paul. The routes to Camarillo and LAX changed over the last couple of years. The current flight path noise issue is in the last 2 to 3 years. How did it come about that these routes were changed without any public comments after a few years ago? And then also, quickly, can you require small planes to use mufflers?
Well, the first part of the question deals with a different section of airspace centered on the LA airports. So that's not something that we have any real say on in terms of decisions made about flight routes in the LA basin that affects what we may experience here. The other one is, can we what?
Can we require small planes to use mufflers?
Yeah, that's just no. we don't have things to say about airplanes.
Thank you, Dave. Okay. How are airport approach routes coordinated so that an area doesn't experience the noise from multiple airports in different counties? So is there any coordination done? Does anybody have any insight there?
I'll take a shot. Just to be very transparent, the answer I'm about to give, I work for Lean Technology Corporation. This does not say Federal Aviation Administration, okay? Because I'm going to try to provide some insight about what the FAA does in that situation. So the FAA goes through an environmental screening and review process. And I'm choosing my words very carefully because they choose their words very carefully too. And anytime there needs to be a change to a departure procedure, an approach procedure, an arrival procedure, they must go through their own independent environmental screening and environmental review process. And that is the FAA's opportunity to look at those situations and see if the change that they're contemplating is going to make the situation better or worse. If they think it's going to make the situation worse, they then have to take additional public outreach steps, which could escalate up into an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement, as you saw for things like LAX or Burbank Van Nuys, etc. That is the only opportunity that I'm aware of that the FAA has to look at that situation where you have a residential area with multiple airports and multiple procedures. I want to be very clear. I use the word procedure change. The FAA does not have the resources to go back today and look at existing state. So they rely on the change process to do that review. They don't go look at what's existing. They rely on public feedback that comes either through the airports or through their regional administrator or their community noise ombudsman to see if there's challenges that they need to review. I hope that answers the question. Again, not an FAA answer. That was just a Paul Ham answer.
Thank you, Paul. Can the airport implement landing ties based on aircraft, weight, time, etc., and to meet cash flow requirements and future liability for environmental contamination?
It sounds like that was probably fees, maybe?
Yeah, so it's weight, time of day, funding, debt service, and other reserves, and to meet cash flow requirements and future liability for environmental contamination. It's a big one.
It's kind of loaded up in there, isn't it? Well, I would start and probably end with the statement that says we are not allowed to place restrictions on the activity at the airport. We don't have that ability to do that. That's not our domain. It's not our jurisdiction. So aircraft operate independently of what they kind of does. We take care of the airport. Aircraft in flight are the domain of FAA.
Can these landing fees support the airport financial independence in place of relying on FAA grants?
If we want the FAA grant money that's offered to us. They take care of all the airports in their system. That's a welcome thing. If we didn't have that money, there's no way we'd be able to charge enough of our pilots to do that. And in the realm that we have now, we are already self-sustaining. So we do not take any county funds, no taxpayer funds come from us that are collected locally among our taxpayers. The users support the system, and that's the way we operate. So looking ahead to some unknown liability for anything is just not something we could address now or with any type of landing fee.
Okay, there's another loaded one. We're going to get the question out. What can the airport do to help the community beyond voluntary measures?
I think the only way you'd be able to express beyond voluntary measures would be compulsory or regulatory, and we've covered the fact that we are operating in a voluntary realm. So we just work really hard to make sure that what is good common sense and that can be brought to our pilot community through education and awareness, that's what we do. That's what we work hard on.
Okay, I'm sorry, did you have a clarifying point? Oh, they could find them, she said.
Oh, no, we do not have the ability to levy fines. That's among the things we can do.
Okay, last new question here. When and why have the airplane flight path and patterns changed, and why did they choose the flight paths also? Why did we allow a jet hangar on Las Pasos, I think I'm saying that right, and Ventura Boulevard to be built? Seems like we are planning to expand to more flight traffic.
That's also something we've talked about over the many meetings we've had. Is this was a military facility that was given to the county, so we have some obligations with when that happened in the 1976. We also have grant assurances when we take federal funds to maintain the facility. So we can't just say no to aviation growth or development. It has to be reasonable. So that's why we have new facilities like the ones on Las Posas. Flight paths change. I don't know that they've changed in the last several decades.
So, is this a clarifying point, sir? Clarifying?
Oh yeah, the flights have definitely changed. The flight patterns have definitely changed.
Yeah, let's talk about whether it was a visual approach or on an instrument approach. So the instrument approaches have been around for a long period of time. Visual approaches, that can be anywhere as they're coming into the air. So that may be where you see things that are different.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. So now we're going to move into our open questions. Any questions that weren't answered here, you can stand up and ask now. Yes. So were they detailed as far as 5 points? Okay, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to stand up and ask your questions now because we've gone through all of them that were original. So let's go ahead and stand up. If anybody has any questions, raise your hand and we'll pass the microphone around.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we'll have the staff go through them now to make sure there's nothing else we need to address. But if there's something you want to stand up and ask, please do. Here, let's make sure we give you the microphone. Elsa, Jessica, can we pass the microphone around? Anybody else have a question? You can raise your hand and we'll bring the microphone over to you. Okay,
Yeah, no, that person first.
So, Jessica, if we can go over here to the left side here. Ma'am, if you could stand up and say your name and ask your question. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Wendy Nicole. Yes, we will. I had a question about the landing fee. What I read, it was on Federal Register.gov, said that airport proprietors should consider the public interest in establishing airport fees, et cetera, and then all the points I made there, that those by law can be charged as part of airport operations. And the thought was we could recover, number one, reach break-even or profitability and be self-sufficient. And not, I know the FAA grants are great, but, you know, they come with a lot of ties, like this study. But it does seem that that is possible. And the other thought is we're relying on these private operators that have very expensive planes. They clearly have the money for those planes, and the fees wouldn't hurt them, but it would at least we set time limits, right? You can do it by time of day, discourage the late flying, things like that. But we could use those landing fees to not only help the airport, but protect the community from the noise and the pollution, et cetera.
So for clarity, I think I earlier said our annual budget for the two airports is about $10 million. We have reserves of $18 million. So kind of what you've heard from our team is the structure we currently have, and by the way, we do charge landing fees for every airplane over 10,000 miles. We currently do that. The key is what you touched on is we can't do punitive things, because that's really what we're doing is discouraging and use those words. Hey, we don't want you flying from 10 to 6, therefore your landing fee is going to be $10 million. Right? So we're discouraging. That's what the FAA doesn't allow us to do. And our structure we currently have is self-sufficient right now. With a $10 million annual budget and reserves of $18 million financially, obviously, we're doing okay. So we can't create some disincentive, which I think is what we're trying for. That would not allow us to do.
Thank you. Okay, Madeline, you want to read out this question?
Yes. It appears we did have a card that was missed. Mr. Oppenheimer had a 5-part question, so we'll circle back to that.
Oh, there's only one question at a time.
Yes, one at a time. So, number 1, why not limit hours of operations like John Wayne Airport in Orange County?
So, as we talked about, the FAA doesn't allow us to, but as I mentioned earlier, we had a joint powers agreement. So what was happening around the country, some of you have heard this before, airports across the country were creating their own noise restrictions, and it was interfering with interstate commerce across the country. In 1990, the FAA said no more. So any restrictions an airport had at that time, we had a joint powers agreement from 1976, which says no departures from midnight to 5, that was grandfathered in. John Wayne, that was grandfathered in. Worked at Long Beach Airport, they had to restrict. So those things are grandfathered. So anything new, we can't do. Corey touched on the Part 161 study. You can go through a whole horrific process, and there's not a single airport since 1990 that's had a noise restriction added. LAX has tried for a long time, spent $10 million, and they said no. Burbank's tried for 7 years, spent $7 million, and they said no. So we just simply can't add new restrictions.
Thank you, Keith. Second question, why not have planes rev up in an area where noise is blocked? I hear it near Las Posas and Earl Joseph.
Well, those are kind of input that we looked at while we're doing this study. If there's changes we could make, noise berm, different location, those were set historically, the run-up areas were set and how we configured the airport right now. But if there's things we can do to mitigate, that's what we're doing here. Whether it's noise berms or other things that we make noise, if that's possible.
Thank you. Third question, much of what was mentioned is voluntary. What mandatory rules are being added?
Nothing mandatory, as we mentioned, we don't have that.
We did have some management things, so working on, well, you can cover those, right? The management kinds of things that are going into the plan that we're asking FAA to approve that become, it's not noise mitigation, but there's things that you say mandatory.
And then number 4, why must this airport grow at this rate?
Again, that goes back to the responsibility. When we took this facility, it's part of the National Transportation System, military base, deeded to the county. We have obligations to manage it. That doesn't mean we don't have some balance in what we do, and that's what you heard tonight. We understand that. It's important to our elected officials, to us, and the community, that there's a balanced approach. Is it just wide open? We have some things we can do as we progress. As I mentioned, there quite frankly isn't much room for growth. That question 6? All right. Okay.
So I can understand that argument if we're talking about more hangars for small planes that have always been served at that airport. But these newer hangars designing and made for a much larger bench. So is that part of that mandate that road has to include larger planes?
I'll answer at the high level. The answer is yes, we can't just say, we want no more jets at all, that's it. But can we say, we think this segment, smaller airplanes, businesses that serve airplanes, that's where we want to focus. And that's what you saw in our AOP update was more that focus than larger. Can we just blanket say, no, we're not allowed to do it? But can we do other things to balance the aviation demand? Yes.
And that addresses the final question on this card, which was why not keep it for smaller planes? So now I can turn it back over to Stacey to open it back up to the crowd.
Thank you. So, yes, go ahead. If you'll stand up and say your name.
Yeah, hi, my name is Mike. I've lived here since I was a kid. From my knowledge, I heard that Santa Monica Airport has stopped my private flights, and that is one reason that Camarillo's traffic has increased. Is this true or false?
Yeah, we don't know specifically, but what we've seen is the demand for aviation is usually associated with the area in which the business and the operator lives, those kinds of things. So could we have gotten some from Santa Monica? Possibly. It's not closed completely yet. 2028 is the final closure.
Okay. So if Santa Monica can begin the process to reduce this, what can Camarillo do to follow Santa Monica's suit?
Well, I think the things you heard tonight are the things we're looking to follow suit. They're looking to completely shut down the airport. That's not necessarily the direction that we're talking about.
That you're talking about. The people here, I think, wouldn't mind it. I also have not seen anything regarding Camarillo as getting any benefit from it for the residents, for the schools, for the kids. All I hear is how stay private. I want to know what it's going to do for us because I grew up here, my grandma in Van Nuys. I remember Van Nuys and Burbank as a beautiful place growing up, just like Camarillo is. It's going to be like that here. If you guys don't stop and make more noise.
So again, what offers we're working to balance that, and the benefit is, again, those airports, folks that are using the airport,
I don't want to hear.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. I came to say my piece.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, next, let's go to you, sir. And if you could say your name. Oh, did you want to answer? No, sorry. Yeah, please.
So, we've asked that, people have asked that, what's the benefit? The airplanes that are operating in and out of the Camarillo and Oxnard are servicing the businesses and the people that live and do business here in Oxnard.
How many jets are there on?
They're not landing here to go do business in downtown LA. They're doing it because
A lot of the jets that we see are stopping Van Nuys and dropping off the planes and coming here to park. What benefit?
Again, I would say that the benefit of the businesses that we see on large numbers are doing business with the ports and businesses in. There's 850,000 people in Ventura County. There are a lot of businesses that do business here, and that's why they come here. Even those folks that may live very close and base their airplane, the fact that the airplane is here, there is a lot of business associated with the airplane just being here. The pilots, the flight crew, the support, the hangar and all that, the businesses and jobs here. I realize individually there might not be a connection.
Thank you, Keith. Sir, if you could say your name first.
Yeah, my name is Dennis Candy. Having grown up here since the 50s, which is probably beyond him, the airport was there first. When I moved out here from Japan, I came back from overseas, in Camarillo, there weren't all the homes in Ponderosa Corridor and all. I, as a responsible homeowner, bought my home knowing where schools, cities, shopping, and airports were. Now, I've watched the encroachment of the city onto the airport. The Ponderosa Corridor, we fought for years to keep that open, and now there are all these homes, and then people continue to have noise. And they built that big berm to keep the freeway noise out, but what it does is it channels all the noise from our aircraft as we fly over. So again, it's up to the city and the county to prevent encroachment. Van Nuys, there was nothing out there when I was a kid. I used to camp out there. There were no homes. LAX, there were no homes really around it. Torrance Airport was all farming. Camarillo was farming when I first got here, and now it has grown. People moved in knowing that the airport was there. And as a responsible homeowner, we need to start taking responsibility for ourselves. So there has been encroachment. I've seen from 1957 on, having lived here.
Thank you, sir. Over here, Jessica, to the left. Ma'am, if you'll stand up and say your name and your question.
Sure. I'm Lauren De La Torre, and the question was kind of brought up a moment ago. It seems like there's a lot of traffic from Van Nuys in the evening, late evening, early morning, and it seems like the clients that own the jets or maybe rent the jets, they get dropped off at Van Nuys and then they get a car and they go to wherever they live, Hidden Hills, wherever that is, and then the jet flies on its own with its crew to land. Is there anything we can do to not necessarily discourage it, but that just seems like we're living with a lot of anxiety and a lot of noise because people need to be dropped off at a closer airport to where they actually live. I know they probably can't go to Van Nuys because it's overbooked there too. It just seems like such a mixed message because part of our noise and waking up in the middle of the night is because people are getting dropped off. They're wealthy people, they can afford that, and then they disrupt everybody the whole path going from Van Nuys to Camarillo.
Thank you.
Hi, Lauren. So part of what Paul wants to do for us is to show how we can reduce that's an unfortunate circumstance, no question about it, and you know that we've indicated it's very difficult for us to work on that issue because we are not allowed to add any new restrictions on that. But what we can do is to work to find alternative paths for these jets to come into. So if they're coming into runway 26, landing to the west, can they offset a little bit, fly a course that's not directly over the neighborhood? That may help. If they're a little bit higher, that may also help. If we can give them directions and a good safe pathway to land on the opposite end, that could help. Those are the things we're working on. What we can't do is just make it stop.
I actually have a question.
Does it make a difference that it's in the middle of the night when they're coming and 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, it's dark out? Does that make a difference?
Right, and those are the things that Keith and Jeanette work on, is to get those pilots when we can and say, fly. So, well, yeah. So one of the things we learned as we were talking, as Jeanette are talking to the flight crews, is it sounds like there's this drop-in, which wouldn't make sense. You're drop off. Why would you do? What we're learning is things like these are international flights. Many times they're international flights, and they're meeting TSA and customs to get through. So that's why they're stopping at an intermediate airport.
Do they do TSA at Van Nuys?
Again, where they're coming from, but those are some of the things we learned. The short hops, those are some of the things that they're doing. The other is directly answering your question is that's specifically what Jeanette and I talk about with flight crews. These are the changes our community wants to see. Yep.
Thank you. Jessica, behind you.
Hi.
If you could say your name.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Jennifer. Much like that gentleman that said his piece and pieced out, I'm going to do the same thing. You guys are gaslighting us. You are not answering questions. I want to know how this secret World War II airport became this giant community hub. How did it go? The gentleman that said you purchased your homes around the airports? True, yeah. But this was a military secret base originally. So how did it go from that to what it is now and you guys ignoring the residents? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No answers? All right. Have a good night.
Yeah, I don't know about the secret military base. I think
It was
most
World
people
War
knew it
II.
was military base for a while. Anybody want me to follow up?
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Any questions? We're gonna. Yes, sir. Jessica, do you want to come here? Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have a question? I'm sorry. Yes, please go ahead first.
So I think
You can say your name. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm Cheryl. I think a lot of the confusion that I've had is so people. There's been a lot of great feedback. I'll do more research too. I'm from Ventura County. I moved out. My husband, when he was living in Ontario, I knew what it was like having planes. I'd never heard such a place. And then living in Studio City between Van Nuys and Burbank, my ears were constantly ringing when I came back into Ventura County. It was quiet. And I think the confusion, so I love that there is the input on letting the public and the locals here know the sound. It's true. I'm not in necessarily the same area here in Camarillo that the planes are coming over. If there's any way that just the public can have it communicated even more than just meeting quarterly or how we've done it, for us to please keep us posted on how to minimize the sound at night, because I never want to go back to that. That was a factor of why we moved back to Ventura County, was the sound, because it is the decibels and everything. It really does impact, and I had a brain injury a few years ago, and so I didn't realize how heightened my senses are to be in direct, it just would be nice to continue to communicate with the neighbors and the public on what is still continuing to happen to alleviate the nighttime. I love that you're talking to the pilots and the people that if they're using more information to really continue. I think that's what you're saying, is how you're getting the word out in the last couple of years, and I appreciate it, because I've been nervous too. I'm moving away because of the noise.
Thank you.
Please be sure to be on our mailing list. See Jeanette if you are not part.
Perfect. Thank you. Sir, if you could stand up and say your name.
Yes, my name is Tony. I'm learning that there's several flight paths. There's one military, one civilian. Are the civilian aircraft restricted from flying through the military flight path? Adding on to the traffic noise, I'm in a military flight path, right, or living in that area, and I just wanted to know if the civilian aircraft will increase traffic in those areas.
So just to make sure, can you go back those quickly? So we showed this slide. Is this what you're referring to by chance, where the green path is the military? So it is possible for civilian aircraft to go right through the green path, but there have to be no military aircraft using the approach at that particular time. Yeah, exactly. So, I know the base has sorties, right? And I'm sure the sorties come through, and then they probably aren't. There are lulls in the activity, and that's when those air traffic controllers, those terminal, radar controllers, those are the times they're going to see that there's a gap, and then they're going to take advantage potentially of the altitude. But they need a procedure. They have to have a published procedure to, to go right through it, if that makes sense. So today, the paths coming into Camarillo are designed to be underneath the paths going into Bagoo. It is possible for us to look at options where the blue path goes smack through the green path. It just reduces the likelihood that aircraft will be cleared to fly that approach, because it means that no aircraft can be coming into Bagoo when that's going to happen.
So being that they can take advantage of that if there's less military traffic and they do fly at a lower altitude, and if I live up at Mission Oaks area, so it is a few hundred feet higher in elevation, so that means that we would get increased air traffic, civilian air traffic, which is in turn increasing the noise.
I might be misunderstanding your question, but I
can clarify. So you were mentioning the military aircraft is higher and the civilian aircraft fly a little bit lower, and that the civilian aircraft can take advantage of that airspace when the military are not flying. So in turn, the civilian aircraft are flying later in the evening, at a lower altitude, when available, I guess.
At the moment, that is kind of the consequence of what's happening. That like this is how the airspace has been designed, and that's why we want to try and bump both of them up. But if we can't bump both of them up, we can still look at taking the blue path into Camarillo and just stepping it up. It just means that it might not be as usable, or it might need to be like another approach that doesn't exist, and that's the one that gets used by air traffic for certain hours. Sorry, this is getting a little bit technical, but I hope I answered your question to some extent. Correct. I don't think there would be an increased number of operations.
In a sense, it is increased here in noise, but not necessarily for civilian. For us, we have a law for the military side of what we were in call it a day, and the civilian takes up. So it's not necessarily we get a law because it can be replaced by civilian aircraft. You know what I'm saying? From the military side, when we had taken out, then the noise continuing of the civilian aircraft. As opposed to just that life path being pulled up together. It's possible to switch the civilian aircraft from the military life path.
Yeah, and again, I'm a little confused because the intent is not, if anything, it's to raise all, to make it less noisy for anybody that's on the ground, and or move it away from communities that are affected by immigrants. So again, I'm not following how it would change in a negative way if we're trying to change the.
Can the civilian planes fly in the green, or can it be restricted to flying in the green?
Oh, okay. So no, the civilians don't fly in the green; they fly through it, the blue. So they're not now churning into the military, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, so I was saying, when the military, when there's a wall in there, the civilian take advantage of that.
So what you're saying is that doesn't change. The green is always military, and the blue is always civilian. We may move the civilian farther south, but it's not civilian now flying the green, because that would go into one and go.
Thank you. Okay. Was that our microphone? Someone grab that. Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Last call. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for hanging in there and submitting your questions. And if there's anything else you want to talk to the team about, they're going to be hanging out for a few more minutes. Thank you so much. Have a good night.